Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in to the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. The week has finally come. It is draft week, and we'll be at the NFL draft Thursday and Friday doing our afternoon show. And actually, you could have a chance to win to see the draft. We'll be giving away a pair of tickets on Wednesday. 609-919-9200 is the number for that on Wednesday. But now joining us is someone that is great to talk NFL draft with, along with the Eagles, and that's Ray Didinger from Comcast Sportsnet, who's kind enough to hop on board with us right now for a few minutes. Ray, it's Zach Gelb. Appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
I'm fine, Zach. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and I appreciate you coming on today. So, number 14, that's the pick the Eagles have in the first round. After all these months of analyzing it and saying who the Eagles are going to pick, who do you think they'll snag at number 14?
Your guess is as good as mine. I really don't know. I think it's a real flip of a coin kind of deal. A lot depends on what happens above you and who's available. But I mean, I think it's hard to narrow it down. I mean, you couldn't. It's not as easy as just saying, well, they're going to go offense or they're going to go defense. I think they could go either way depending on who's on the board. I mean, it's a team that they have a lot of needs, to be perfectly frank. I mean, Jeff Lurie said that at the owners' meetings, and he's right. I mean, they have a lot of holes to fill, and they're on both sides of the ball. So, there's probably something to be said for Howie Roseman's argument of taking the best, highest-rated player on the board, assuming he's not a quarterback, which I don't think in this draft he will be. But, I mean, you could take a wide receiver, you could take a linebacker, you could take a corner, you could take a pass rusher. I mean, they have needs in all those areas. But I think that there's the good thing, if you're looking at it from an Eagles standpoint, is in the areas where they need help, this is a pretty deep draft, and there are a lot of good quality athletes available.
Let's say if they go corner, one name we've heard a lot about recently is Gareon Conley. Do you think he'll be available at 14, and how do you view him as a player?
I like him very much, and yeah, that's the only question. I mean, his stock has risen so fast since he ran the 4.41 at the combine that it's now a very open question as to whether he's actually even going to be there at 14. I mean, before the combine, I didn't think there was any doubt that Conley would be there at 14 if that's who you wanted. I mean, I thought he would be somewhere in the 15 to 20 range would be about where he would go. But he was really good at the combine, and he's been really good in all of his individual workouts. And there's in a draft, in the first round of a draft, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to take any risk. If there's any red flags or something, you got to be real careful. And Conley doesn't have any of it. I mean, he was a durable player in college, doesn't have any injury history, doesn't have any history of off the field problems. He was a real consistent player at Ohio State. I mean, there's really if you're looking for a guy who's a safe pick, a guy that you pretty much can't go wrong on, there's a lot to like in Gareon Conley.
Now, another name that we hear linked to the Eagles, and there's a lot of debate about him, and we know that he had a tremendous college career, but that's the running back out of Stanford and Christian McCaffrey. If that's the pick at 14, your reaction would be?
It'd be hard to argue against it because he did have such a great college career, and this organization has made no attempt to hide the fact that one of their priorities is bringing good players and putting them around Carson Wentz and guys that are playmakers better than what they had last year. And McCaffrey is certainly that. I mean, he wouldn't be my choice at 14 because I just don't know. To me, he's not a true running back. I mean, the Eagles need a running back. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you can't go into the season with Sproles and Smallwood as your two running backs. They need a running back. I just don't know if Christian McCaffrey, in my mind, fits that description as an NFL running back. I just don't know that he's a guy that, in the fourth quarter when you got 4 minutes to go and you're trying to run out the clock with a 7-point lead, that he's a guy that's going to be a closer for you. I mean, he's a big play guy. He'll hit some home runs, but I just don't know if he's that, bell cow back. I see him as a guy who's going to be a 15 to 20 touch a game kind of player, a guy that can be productive and can make some big plays, but I just don't know that he's a guy you can lean on as a heavy-duty kind of back. I know he's being compared a lot to Brian Westbrook. I see some of the similarities, but I don't think he's a guy that you can give the ball to as much as the Eagles gave the ball to Brian Westbrook. I think he's a guy that has a specific role, and he's a terrific receiver. In terms of being a receiver out of the backfield, he's certainly the best of this class. But at 14, I don't know. I don't think I would take him at 14. But I know there are some people at the Eagles organization that like him, and it wouldn't be a huge shock to me if that's the way they chose to go.
Ray Didinger with us right now from Comcast Sportsnet, breaking down all aspects with the Eagles in the NFL draft. NJ.com released an article today talking about how the Eagles do have a lot of interest in Joe Mixon. We talk about red flags. Clearly that wouldn't be at number 14. But how about if the Eagles maybe get Joe Mixon in the second round or maybe trade up for him to get up a little bit earlier in the second round? What is your thoughts on Joe Mixon?
Well, I wouldn't touch him. I mean, to me, he wouldn't even be in the discussion. I mean, I just don't want – I wouldn't want a guy like that on my football team. I mean, simple as that. But I know there are some teams. I know there are some teams that have taken that position and have just taken him off their board. But there are other teams that still are considering him. And I don't know where the Eagles stand, but I've heard that he's in the conversation. As I said just a moment ago, they certainly need a running back. If you're just talking in terms of his football ability, it's without question he's a first-round talent. If there wasn't any of the off-the-field stuff, I mean, he's a guy you'd think about drafting at 14. I mean, he's that good. But I wouldn't touch him. I wouldn't touch him. And it's not just because of the public relations stuff. It's not just because of the protests and all the flack that you're going to get and all the PR nightmare that's going to come with him. I mean, that's part of it, and some teams going to have to live with that if they make the decision to take him. But I just wouldn't take him because I just don't want a guy like that on my football team.
And you hear both sides of this argument, and clearly what I saw from Joe Mixon in that video and some of the things after that, it's despicable and it's definitely red flags. But if he could help your football team, the reality is there's going to be a team that will take him because he is a young talent. In this process, since you've been doing it for a long time and you get to talk to a lot of higher-ups with teams, what type of questions would they ask a guy like Joe Mixon to try to see if he really does show serious remorse?
It's not something you're going to learn in a question and answer session. I mean, he's been so coached up and scripted by his agents and his handlers at this point that, yeah, I'm sure everybody that's brought him in has asked him the same questions, and he's been rehearsed and prepared to, these are the answers you want to give in these situations. It's up to you to determine what's true remorse and what's not. I don't even need to go there. I mean, I saw what I saw. And I don't care what he tells me face to face. I'm just going to say, I don't want you on my football team. Sorry. But look, somebody's going to take him, and I think it's going to happen on day 2. I still don't think anybody's going to take him on day 1. But I think on Friday, either in round 2 or in round 3, somebody's going to draft him. And you know what? He's going to make a team next year, and he's probably going to play well because he's that good. But I mean, they better be prepared to answer an awful lot of questions when they take him, because once he comes off the board, he will become the biggest story of the draft. That's all anybody's going to talk about is who took Joe Mixon and why. And that they better be prepared because that first press conference is going to be a doozy.
And really, in this draft, the two running backs that have been linked because of off-the-field problems is Joe Mixon, who we talked about, and then also Dalvin Cook. And we had Joe Marino on from FanRag, draft analyst, and he was telling me 16 teams already have Dalvin Cook off their board. With Dalvin Cook, it seems like a lot of teams have apprehension about him. So how do you view Dalvin Cook? Is it the same thing? You're not touching him either?
Probably not. And it pains me to say that because I liked him so much when I saw him play in college, and then I began looking at the tape of him after it was over, and I liked him even more just as a player. I think he's got, in terms of the skill set, to me he is the prototype of what you want in an NFL running back right now. His ability to run it between the tackles, his ability to run zone stretch plays, his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, his ability to run routes as a legitimate receiver. I mean, he runs the best wheel route of anybody coming out of college for sure. I mean, on my grading system, just from a football standpoint, I have him ahead of Fournette. I mean, you talk to most of the draft people and you look at most draft boards, I think they would all have pretty much. I think across the board they would probably have Fournette rated as the number one running back. I don't. I mean, I just think he's in today's NFL with the things you're going to ask running backs to do. I think he's a real limited player. If you draft him, you better be committed to lining up in an I formation and running the ball 25, 30 times a game. You better be prepared to use him as a heavy-duty, old-school kind of running back. But there aren't that many teams that are running that offense anymore. Dalvin Cook is the kind of player who can do everything. I mean, he can do that, but he can also spread out. He can also catch the pass, and he's a home run hitter. I mean, he's a guy that every time he touches the ball, he's a threat to take it all the way. As a player, I loved Dalvin Cook as a player. I really did. And if he didn't have any of these off-the-field issues, I would absolutely be standing on the table saying that the Eagles should take him at 14 if he was there, because he would be a perfect fit here and a guy that they could really use. But the stuff that's the off-the-field stuff, you cannot ignore it. And in the first round, if there's that kind of risk attached to a player, I'm just not prepared to do that.
Right. Last week, Sporting News came out with an article, 5 names. One of these 5 will be on the Philadelphia Eagles once the 14th pick comes and goes on Thursday. We already talked about Conley. We already talked about Christian McCaffrey. The other 3 were John Ross, Charles Harris, and Derek Barnett. Do you like the other 3? Do you like some of them? Do you not like one of them? How about the other 3 in Ross, Harris, and Barnett?
Barnett's number 1. I think that if Barnett's there at 14, to me, he would be my pick. I would even take him ahead of any of the defensive backs. And I like Conley, but if I had a choice between Barnett and Conley, I would take Barnett because I really do believe there are enough good cornerbacks that you can get a good cornerback in round 2, maybe even a good cornerback in round 3. But one of the things the Eagles have to come out of this draft with, in my opinion, is they need another pass rusher. They need somebody else who can get pressure on the quarterback. I mean, last year the entire defensive line here got 21 sacks for this team. That's just not good enough. You know, he gave up a lot of big plays, and everybody blamed it on the secondary. But a lot of it was they just didn't have enough pass rush. So in addition to getting better cover guys, you need somebody that can improve your pass rush. And there are some of them in the draft, but there aren't as many as there are corners. So if I have a shot at a guy like Barnett, yeah, I'll take him at 14. But the other guys, Ross, Ross is, he's been compared to, and it's a fair comparison, to Sean Jackson. I mean, he's an explosive, fast receiver. But there were real durability concerns. I mean, the guy's already had surgery on both knees. I don't know. I think that's too much of a risk for me at 14. And Harris is another one of these late risers. His stock has really gone up. But I see him as a guy who's basically going to be asked to do the same kinds of things as Barnett. I mean, he's an outside edge pass rusher, but I don't think he's as good as Barnett. So given the choice between those two guys, I'll take Barnett.
Ray Didinger with us from Comcast Sportsnet. Ray, where's your confidence in Joe Douglas, by the way?
High. No, I think he's very good. He's everyone. I mean, I don't know him, but I mean everybody I know of him, and everybody around the league that you talk to about him has a very, very high opinion of him. And that's one of the things I'm going to be interested to see is the kind of character that this draft takes, and look at the guys that the Eagles select and get a sense of, does this kind of look like a Joe Douglas draft? Are his fingerprints going to be on this draft? Because everything you hear from the organization, and this is from Jeff Lurie on down, is that Joe's going to have a very, very big voice in this. Now, they've all said that he's the guy that's built the draft board for them. All the advanced scouting, all the prep work, all the film evaluation, and the whole grading system. As you stack the players position by position on the board, when you go into the draft, that's critical. I mean, that's going to be your roadmap through the draft, is position by position how these guys are rated, top to bottom. You gave them all a grade, and they've turned that over to Joe. So if that's really what they're going to follow, and Howie has said that they're going to be true to their board, then this is going to be a Joe Douglas draft. And I really do think he's good at this. I mean, he's spent most of his career with the Ravens, who have been year in and year out one of the best drafting teams in the NFL, and you have to assume that being there, he's learned some things. So, I think that if Eagles fans, if you're asking what their confidence level should be, having Joe in the room, I think it's got to be pretty good, because I thought he was a good hire when they brought him in, and it seems like they've given him a lot of authority and a lot of say so. And we'll all start to get some of these answers come Thursday night.
When I look at this relationship between Howie and Joe Douglas, I really just want to play the song Just the Two of Us, because it seems like they're buddy-buddy right now and everything's going great in Eagles land, but we'll see what happens in this draft. You mentioned it and you talked about how this thing is being structured, but the question is Howie really going to let Joe do the work, or is Howie going to impede eventually? It seems like the relationship's good now, but the question is how long will that relationship last this way?
Well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll start to find out on Thursday. Right now, I mean, they've done a number of these joint press conferences, and, they seem to be getting along fine, and they're all saying all the right things about, this is going to be a joint effort, and it's going to be a collaboration, and everybody's going to have a voice, and everybody's going to have a chance to voice their opinion, and we're going to come to a consensus, is what they keep saying. We're going to have a consensus. Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. I mean, in a perfect world, you would like that when it comes time to make the pick, that everybody in the room says, yeah, that's the guy. Well, then it's easy when that's what happens. But what happens when, your pick rolls around a Thursday night and Joe Douglas says, we got to go defense here. We don't have a cornerback right now, and Gareon Conley staring at us. And Howie says, yeah, but boy, we really want to get playmakers around Carson Wentz, and there's O.J. Howard. Okay, now what happens? Because somebody's got to pick up the phone and make the call. Who has that final say? You would like to think that everybody's going to agree on every pick, but I think we know that that's probably not going to happen.
Let me get into the Temple guys right now, and I got a chance to spend a few hours with them yesterday, and Hassan Reddick and Deion Dawkins. I just saw an NFL mock draft on NFL.com that had Deion going number 15 to the Colts, and then Hassan Reddick going number 17 to the Washington Redskins. I think Deion will be more of a second-round draft pick than Hassan clearly will be a first-round draft pick. Your evaluation on both Hassan and Deion?
I agree with you. I think Reddick will be a first-round pick, he has had a tremendous rise since the end of the season. His individual workouts have been excellent. His interviews have been excellent, and he just killed it at the combine. Starting off with a really fast 40 and then a great vertical, and every drill they put him in, he was right at the very top of the linebacker group. And so he's certainly going to be a first-round pick. And I've seen some people say he could be top 10. To me that seems kind of high. Right now I have him like 20. I have him somewhere between like 20 and 24 on my board in terms of my overall grade. But he could go higher, but I don't think there's any question he's going to go in the first round. Dawkins, I think, is probably I would say a second-round guy, although that he's been getting some first-round talk too. He's a big guy who fits the prototype of what you're looking for in an offensive lineman now, and he has the experience in college of having been a left tackle. A lot of times you don't get the chance to really look at guys at the left tackle position. You kind of project whether they can play there, but he's already been able to put some tape out there about him playing that. I kind of think, at least initially, he's more fit for the right side, or maybe even play inside. I certainly think he could play guard. But he may develop into a left tackle at some point. But he's another guy who originally I was probably thinking of him as maybe a fourth-round pick, but he's now worked his way up to, I think it's safe to say that he's going to go somewhere on day two. I think, I don't think first round, but I think it's pretty safe to say he's going to go in round two.
Ray Didinger, I got two more for you before we let you run, and we appreciate you hopping on board with us today. Quarterbacks. I don't love the quarterbacks in this year's draft. How about yourself?
No, I don't either. But, a bunch of them are going to go just because that's the nature of the position, and everybody values them, and there's a lot of need out there.
How many go in the first round?
At least three. And maybe even four. I've seen some people say four. To me, that's a stretch. I don't think Kaiser is going to be a first-round pick. But I think Trubisky, Watson, and Mahomes will certainly go in the first round. I had somebody the other day tell me that they think two quarterbacks are going to go in the top 10. I think that's crazy. I don't think any. I don't have any of them with anything approaching that kind of a grade. I have Watson as my number one. Trubisky, to me, I just haven't seen enough. He basically played 1 year. And there are people talking about Cleveland taking him at number one. I think that's insane. Even for the Browns, that's insane. I still think they'll take Garrett at number one. He's he's the best player in the draft, and I think there's a lot of talk and a lot of smoke screening right now, but I still think they're going to have taken him number 1. They could very well take Trubisky number 2, and he may be the top quarterback off the board. He wouldn't be on mine. I would take Watson. I think Watson is the best quarterback in this class. I mean, that's at least how I've got them graded. There's some interesting things about Mahomes. I mean, you watch him on tape, he's got some real skill, and boy, he has a live arm. But, I mean, coming out of that crazy offense at Texas Tech, I mean, he's going to have to learn to play the game all over again to play it in the NFL, and that's not going to happen overnight.
In terms of locks, like you just said, Garrett's the best player in this draft. Give me, 3 to 5 more players that you think are locks, and they're going to be really good players in this league.
Well, the guy that I think is absolutely rock solid is Jonathan Allen. I think Jonathan Allen is a guy that, if you're just talking about a guy that you can't miss with, I mean, you just pick this guy and you don't have to worry about anything. He's a good player. He's a good kid. He's going to give you good effort. I mean, if you're just looking to try to eliminate risk and go with a guy that's a sure thing, I think Jonathan Allen, the defensive lineman from Alabama, would probably be that guy. The next guy that I think is kind of a sure thing is Jamal Adams, the safety from LSU. This is an unusual draft. We talked about how many good corners there are in this draft, but a lot of good safeties too. And Adams is the best of them. I mean, he's exactly what teams are looking for in safeties right now. I mean, he's alert, he's aggressive, he's fast, he covers a lot of ground, he's a willing hitter, and he has a real good conceptual understanding of every kind of coverage. I mean, he can play his zone. If the team's spread and he has to come up and play man, he can do that. So I like him. I like him an awful lot. And I like Mike Williams too. I mean, I've seen him enough in a lot of big games at Clemson that I think he's a big-time player. And if somehow he's still on the board at 14, I mean, even though the Eagles have gone out and have gotten themselves a couple wide receivers here in the offseason, in Jeffries and Torrey Smith, if Mike Williams is still sitting there staring at you at 14, you're going to have that conversation. I mean, because you've only got Jeffries on a 1-year contract, and he's had some injury issues, and, of course, the suspension. If you have a chance to bring in a young, talented guy like Mike Williams, I mean, you got to talk about that. Now, I'm not saying I would take him necessarily, but it wouldn't be as simple as just saying, "Now we got our receivers. Yeah, we don't need Mike Williams." You might choose to arrive at that decision, but you better at least have the discussion.
You forgot one name, because I saw Glenn McNally, your partner on the radio at WIP, put a picture out of a 1977 quarterback of Ray Didinger. I think you'd be the best quarterback in this year's draft, Ray.
No, 7th-round pick at best.
What was your scouting report, if you had to break down your scouting report?
Hair too long and feet too slow.
Hey, Ray, you're the best. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, Zach. Take care. Bye-bye.
There's Ray Didinger for Comcast Sportsnet joining us on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. I'm looking at a picture of Ray Didinger. He looks like a young Nick Foles back in 1977. Looks like he's trying to take some snaps under center and is dropping back. This picture that Glenn McNally tweeted out was great. But that's what you have. He doesn't like the guys that have bad character problems. I could understand that. Some team's going to get Dalvin Cook. Some team is going to get Joe Mixon. If they can control them, they'll be good players. And I've said this before. What they did is disgusting. I would not want them in types of situations from a moral standpoint, but the NFL doesn't always go by morals, and that's the reality of it. And some teams going to draft Joe Mixon. Some teams going to draft Dalvin Cook. And if I'm the Eagles, not in the first round, but in the second round, I would be okay with it. I would. And it's disgusting. They're going to have to do the right things, and they're going to have a very short leash, but that's the reality. A team is going to take them. If they can help your football team, they're young, someone is going to give them an opportunity. You look at Ray Rice. Ray Rice was on the downside of his career. Ray Rice has done everything to earn a second chance in his power, but the fact is people don't want to bring him that headache because he's older, and his career is done. But with Joe Mixon, with also Dalvin Cook, they still have a lot of prime years left. That's why you saw Hardy of the Cowboys, even though that guy is a misogynistic monster, that he was given an extra chance for that 1 year period. And then a lot of teams just continue to realize this guy's not changing, and he's just a big jerk who's a misogynistic pig. But some team is going to give Mixon a chance. Some team is going to give Cook a chance as well. But a lot of teams, Supposedly 16 teams have Dalvin Cook off their draft boards. So a lot of teams are apprehensive about him. But with Ray, he loves Conley. He loves Derek Barnett. Barnett he really loves. And I agree with them also with some of the other stuff. Quarterbacks, I don't love any of these quarterbacks in this year's draft. 3 in the first round, that's too much for me. And if I'm the Eagles, because another point that he brought up with Mike Williams, I don't think he'll be there at 14, and neither does Ray. But if he's there at 14, that's the pick to me. He's a stud. But the Eagles have so many needs. Corner, wide receiver, defensive end, running back. There's a lot of needs on this football team, and it'll be fascinating when the draft is in Philadelphia on Thursday, and we'll be live at the NFL draft from 4 to 6 and then doing all this stuff afterwards. And you can follow me on Twitter to get all that coverage at Zach Gelb, ZachGelb. It'll be fascinating to see who they call off and who does get the handshake and the bromance love for a brief second with the commissioner and Roger Goodell. 609-9199-D200, a tremendous spot with Ray Didinger. Follow all his coverage this week on Comcast Sportsnet here in Philadelphia. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. What we'll do right now is we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we got more sports talk as we roll along on this Monday. It's the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey, 920 AM in Bucks, Burlington, and Mercer counties, or worldwide on the web at 920thejersey.com. More of the Zach Gelb Show when we come back.